Prime Minister, many thanks for joining me on the Global Conversation.
It's my pleasure.
In September 2015, so not so long ago, you stated, and I'm going to quote you here, "My Europe takes in people fleeing from war. My Europe does not build walls." Those moral standards seem to have changed for Europe, but also for the Sweden you govern. In hindsight, would you regret a certain naivety to those words?
No, I note that what I said was my Europe, because I think I'm convinced this is an issue for the European Union as a whole. We are 28 member states and with more than 500 million inhabitants. If we have handled this together, we could have managed in a better way. But the reality was there was a few countries that actually took the great responsibility, not least Sweden. We have taken most refugees per capita, if you count per capita in our countries, than any other country. So we have taken definitely our share of the responsibility, but we could also see that with this sharp increase, a dramatic increase of refugees, we could also see that we couldn't handle the reception of the refugees. We could, giving them shelter, roof over their heads, and it also affects the school system and other parts of the system.
But the result has been, in Sweden now, sadly, and also in other European countries, in a much more acute way, more border checks, fences going up, walls going up. Is that actually going to stop immigration?
No, and that is an effect of that we haven't handled it together as 28 member states. So that is the effect, and that is why we need to put the discussion back on the European level seriously. This is something that we can handle together.
And we do have a serious situation,
right?
and this is the thing, because we don't really see that cohesion in Europe to deal with this issue. So then what's Plan B?
Plan B, we need a new system. But we also need a discussion on what will be the future system, meaning, for example, that if you come as a refugee to the European Union, you're not allowed to choose what country you're going to, meaning also that the countries need to have a shared responsibility. And
so you would support mandatory quotas?
Well, in some way to share the responsibility. The technique, we can discuss the forms of it. That is up for discussion.
We asked our online audience to send us in questions for this interview. We received this question from someone who goes by the name of Lucas Bros, who says, "Do you regret welcoming the refugees that you welcomed? And how is it affecting the local people in Sweden?"
No, I don't regret. We have these international conventions for a reason. We have to work with three perspectives. We need to help to solve the Syria conflict. The European Union can definitely play an important role in that. It's difficult. I just met Staffan de Mistura on my way here. He has a very difficult job. We are supporting him to end the conflict. We need to support Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, because they're doing a tremendous job. But of course, we can support them better, so preventing people from having to flee to Europe. The other perspective is the European perspective. And the third perspective is a national perspective. Of course, I don't regret that. But I also need to look into the fact that with this dramatic increase of refugees, we need to see that those numbers that we had, actually, if you transfer it to an annual number of refugees, it was 500,000. That was a pace during October, November. So we had to
which brings me to the second part of the question. What's the mood like in Sweden now? Are locals getting fed up? Are Swedish people now just feeling that the country is saturated to some respect and they feel the resources are just being spread too thinly?
It varies. We have, on one hand, a very strong solidarity. And many people are doing a fantastic job. Our civil society is doing a great job. I've seen it myself. On the other hand, of course, there's also a worry for some people. What does it mean for our society? We have to be clear about that. There is that kind of worry as well. It also depends on what part of the country you're talking. Some local communities have received a lot of refugees, and they see what that means. Other communities have taken almost none. So they have another reality. So it's a mixed picture, but the government, we have to take responsibility and take the decisions that we need to take in order to make sure that the society is functioning.
But if we look again at this at a European level, so Germany, like Sweden, have been exceptional in terms of many of the European countries in the welcome they've given to refugees. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has seen a massive backlash against her in her popularity ratings following the attacks in Cologne. Do you think now that any European leader is going to have the courage, at least in the short term, to say, our country is open again, let us welcome these people who are fleeing persecution, as you say?
Now, once again, it's not about single countries.
Well, who can take leadership on this then? Who do you think has the ability to take leadership on this issue now?
We have a dialogue between Germany, Sweden, Austria, Netherlands, Finland also, because we, as I said earlier, we need a new system, we need another system. And still meaning shared responsibility. So, I mean, the refugee crisis just won't go away. People are still fleeing for their lives. And we have these international conventions. They are there for a reason, going back to the Second World War and what happened then. So we have to find a way to cooperate. It is, finally, it's about shared responsibility. If we share responsibility, we can handle.
So I'd like to bring in another question. This is from somebody called Andre Flames, because integration is obviously an issue, and that was highlighted with the Cologne attacks. And he asks, what role will Sweden play in the next 5 years to make sure refugees from Syria and Iraq are fully settled and not harmful to their host countries? Because we're talking about fast-tracking integration, aren't we? You've got a massive number of people coming. How do you make sure that integration process happens?
First, well, basically, for refugees, it's about the same things as for Swedes. You need a house, a home. You need a job if you're an adult. You need education if you're a young human being. So basically, it's the same thing. But of course, coming from another country, we need to look into how do we support this human being creating a good life in Sweden. Early language training. So we organize language training already when you seek asylum, so very early. We have an agreement with the social partners on what we call a fast track. Some of the refugees come with a skill that we lack in our country. Let's say car mechanic, for example. And then the social partners have made an agreement how to make sure that these people come fast into the working life, and combining on-the-job training with the language training and whatever is needed. Validation, much faster validation. This is your skill. What do you need as a
to get
complementary
people integrated
training?
into society as fast as possible.
Much faster, because we haven't been good enough. That goes for the former government, but also government before.
What about cultural values? Because I know, Sweden is very gender progressive. The World Economic Forum ranks you as 4th in the world when it comes to kind of gender parity. Yeah. How do you transmit those values? Because that goes beyond kind of integrating the workplace. There's something that's quite deep-rooted, and we know that a lot of the refugees coming are young men who may have very different values to our own.
Yeah, on the one hand, I think two important perspectives. On the one hand, we need to stand up for the values that we really think is important: gender equality, equality in general, also democracy, and all these basic things. That is something what we need to stand up for. On the other hand, it's not the case that everybody else from different cultures with different religious belief, or if they don't believe in any religion, think automatically differently than we do. So I don't want a discussion where it's automatically stated that if you come from another culture, you do not share those values. Because that would be, I think, a dangerous discussion within the country. It creates tensions, and we don't need that. You
can also be faced with a sort of moral conundrum, as Chancellor Merkel has faced. What do you do when there are kind of illegal acts that take place that are against your moral values, that are basically criminal acts. What do you do with these people? You can't send them back to Syria, can you?
That's exactly the point. It's criminal acts. We have had sexual harassment in Sweden for many years. Unfortunately, women in Sweden have been facing that for many years. So that is not new with the refugees. It's not a new phenomenon.
Germany, the German press, the German government has come under criticism for trying to cover up the scandal in Cologne, what happened on the New Year's attacks. Sweden faced something similar back in 2012. Given the prominence of the far right, do you think Germany was right to act in that way, to try and cover up what had happened?
I won't tell what is right or wrong in Germany because I don't know those conditions. But in Sweden, I can say it is wrong to cover up. You need to tell the truth. This happened.
I'd like to bring in another voice here because the Swedish model is famed around the world. There's concern now again with the influx of refugees, the impact that will have on that. And someone who goes by the name of Emilia Seven says, can you ask the Swedish Prime Minister how the social system is being affected by the refugee influx?
First, in general, it's not a problem if people move to Sweden because we need people, we need labor force also. Otherwise, we would have problem with the demographic situation.
So, how many people a year would you like to welcome?
I've been asked that question many times. There is no fixed number. But of course, what we saw during the autumn with that dramatic increase, it was dramatic, really. Then we could see. It is a problem handling all these unaccompanied minors, for example, because they need special care. We couldn't. That was unsustainable situation with all these young people. We received almost 100 new school classes every week, meaning that the school system was very tensed and stretched. So that was obvious, and that was the reason why the government took those decisions, that we need to reduce the number of people seeking asylum in Sweden because the welfare system otherwise wouldn't have been able to cope.
Another of the side effects of this crisis is the rise of the far right. Across Europe, in Sweden also, you're home to one of the biggest anti-immigration parties in Europe. Is the far right now just an integral part of the European political system that we now have to accept and work with?
First, I think we need to look into why have they been successful, why have they been growing. And I'm convinced, I've been a trade unionist for many years, I'm convinced it has to do with people's fear and worry about the future. And in an environment where you see there's a very insecure labor market, will I have a job next week or not? And if I can't work, what will happen to my economy? So we had an unfortunately 8 years where our social system was decreased safety, security. And that creates the space for these simple solutions, saying if only those people weren't here, we would be fine, which is not the truth. So our task now, and that is why we're focusing, is to provide people with jobs. Jobs is number one, both for the individuals, but also for the society. And also make sure that if you are out of a job, if you lose your job, we will support you with retraining, you will have this path to a new job.
The refugee crisis affects so many different parts of society. Also in Europe, the Schengen issue is a massive one. How much of a risk is Schengen now posing to European safety? Do we have to reevaluate Schengen?
Now, we need to make sure that we can control the borders, because otherwise Schengen is...
external borders.
Exactly, the external borders, because otherwise Schengen is threatened, because it is built on the fact that we can control the external borders.
If we look at those external borders, can we control them?
Yes, I'm sure that we can. We can combine efforts in much more than we are doing today. So yes, I believe we can control the borders.
European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker has been sounding the alarm bells, and he recently said, without Schengen, Europe has no point. If many people are writing Schengen's obituary already. If Schengen disintegrates, in your opinion, will Europe disintegrate as well?
Well, it would be a devastating loss, so to speak. Of course, if Schengen doesn't work, it is one of the basic pillars, of course, that we can move freely within this region, and that would be. I mean, it would be devastating for businesses, for private people.
How hopeful are you that Schengen can continue as it is, given the current state of play?
Yeah, I'm sure that all countries see the need of a Schengen. I think all the countries see the serious situation if Schengen doesn't work, if it breaks down, what will happen to the European Union, and we would lose so much that has been built up over the years.
So many countries are basically responding differently to this refugee crisis. Britain, in many respects, is holding a referendum which is largely caused by worries over immigration, amongst many others, obviously. But there's a major pushback also against European integration. If Britain were to leave the European Union, what impact would that have?
Well, from a Swedish point of view, we have stated clearly that we think it's very important that Great Britain stays within the European Union. It would be bad for Britain, but also bad for Europe, of course, because they are an important part of the European Union.
But some are saying it could be the beginning of a domino effect. Other countries will follow suit.
Well, that's hard to say, but of course it would be a good sign if one country leaves. Of course not. So I do hope that we can negotiate a good deal, balancing between, on one hand, Britain's wishes for another some new parts in the deal. On the other hand, also standing up for the basic principle of the European Union.
Your personal story could be seen as the Swedish dream, the equivalent of the American dream. You were a child who was brought up in foster care. You're now Prime Minister. Does that dream still exist in Sweden?
I hope so. We want a society with equal value for everybody and a freedom for everybody, which takes a society built on solidarity. And when you have that solidarity, when you know you can have, every kid has a good education, right to good education, being a strong individual as an adult, a welfare system, a job, a home, and all these basic things, healthcare, of course, for everybody. And if you see that there's a close relation between people, if you have that, I'm convinced of that. Everybody should be able, of course, to live their dream and to develop as they want. And I think the more you build a strong society with security and safety, social security, the more likely that people with perhaps a poorer background or parents that haven't that good education, or workers, families, they're also given the chance to develop and live their dream.
And finally, one last question. You've answered it partially here, but just in a word, we've got a question here from Hazel Michelle Chandra, who says, what's the key to a successful country? If I were to ask you to pinpoint one thing.
One thing is to make sure that the society is built for everybody. It's an inclusive society where everybody can feel, yes, I can develop my freedom. I feel safe in this country. I have a future, a bright future, a possibility of a bright future. It's up to me. I have to do my own part of this, but I know I have this possibility.
Prime Minister, many thanks for having been with us.
Thank you.